Today's video sponsor is Raise Energy. Use code Phantasm to save 15% off now. Link in the description.
Alright, what's going on, guys? Today, just going to be talking about why people stop using Mouse Accel. And the main purpose of the video is why people stop using it. And I think after about 3 years, maybe 4 now, of playing on Accel, I'm just going to share my experience and why I'm still playing on it when I see tons of videos like on channels that start out like, Mouse Accel is amazing, whatever, Mouse Accel, aimbot settings, something like that, and then you see 2 months later, on the same channel, I stopped, using Mouse Accel. Why I stopped, blah, 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 right? So, today, that's what I'm going to be talking about, and I'm actually one of the guys that have stuck with it all the way, and I don't ever see myself changing. I'm just too used to it now, and the reason most people go to Accel, it's getting a little more popular now because of Valorant, and Valorant is a very flicky game. It's a lower time to kill, so it's pretty much Mouse Accel's best territory as far as aiming, because aiming for long periods of time, like tracking, is really difficult on Accel, especially when you first start, because it's a different type of motion. And I guess before I should have put this on here, because people are the first discovery is always, oh, Mouse Accel is actually good. That's like the first big thing, right? Well, the thing is Mouse Accel, even the good kind, is essentially the same as it's always been. It doesn't matter what the sensitivity is that you set it to. It's still the movement of how fast you move your wrist or your arm is how fast the mouse will go. It's different than just setting, to one point on the mouse pad. So let's see. So if you're watching this, you probably already have some understanding of it, but just in case you don't, if I move my mouse from here, it's the starting point, just say S, the starting point to the end point, my God. Alright. And this speed is like, I don't know, 12 meters, something like that. Or the distance is 12 meters, let's just say, or 12 centimeters, sorry. 12 centimeters. Okay, well, if you move your hand at, I don't know, 1.2 miles an hour, something like that, 1.2 miles an hour, well, then your end point is going to be different if you flicked 1.3 miles an hour. So it doesn't really matter if it's good Accel or bad Accel. The fundamental difference is, no matter what your end speed is, it doesn't matter. It doesn't change this. So I think that's one of the reasons why people think, oh, well, Accel is different, because you can set a sensitivity cap to where it doesn't just fling out into infinity anymore. If you throw if you move your hand at 20 miles an hour or something ridiculous, it doesn't just fling out into infinity anymore. Okay, well, it still does. It's just that on this graph, on a linear scale here, if you don't have control over where it is that you want to stop on the endpoint here, you're going to end up with a very inconsistent play. One time you flicked here, it was too slow, but you were trying to get here on this endpoint here. The next time, okay, you realized it wasn't enough speed, so you flicked a little bit harder, and then you overshot it. So this is one of the reasons why Mouse Accel, even at low sensitivities and with the sensitivity cap, it's so frustrating to play on. Now, let's get out of this. Alright. Get rid of all this. Alright. The reason I'm still playing on it is I think it's just a tracking thing. I think that the tracking is just one of the hardest parts about Mouse Accel. Equals hard, right? It's pretty hard. Did I just misspell that? Okay. So it's hard. And the reason for it is because if your target is moving from left to right, let's say at a solid speed, just for the ease, your mouse is kind of going, your tracking motion is not going to be the same without Mouse Accel. So with Mouse Accel, it's going to look kind of like this. Like, okay, you moved it a little bit, and then maybe you've kind of stopped, and then you moved it a little bit, then you kind of stop, moved it a little bit, and then you kind of stop. Versus traditional aiming without acceleration is pretty much just going to look just like this. So that's one thing. That's the reason why it's so hard, because it's not a straightforward motion straight across, just like, you know, from one point to another. It's one of the reasons why it's so hard. For me, the reason why I'm still using Mouse Accel is because before I started using Mouse Accel, I learned 3 different sensitivities. So I started out on 400. I played on 400 for a year. I played on 600 for 2 years. And then I played on 800 for another year. So I have all the muscle memory, and I know where my strengths are and where my weaknesses are. Basically, 400 is probably my best setting as far as like sensitivity. If I just leave my in-game settings like sense the same, I can play on all 3 of those different sensitivities and do about the same. The difference is the 400 is more consistent without Mouse Accel, and I'm talking about all of these without Mouse Accel. So I learned 400, 600, and 800. One of the biggest problems of why people go into Mouse Accel and it's so new, it's so exciting, is simply because they're going probably from a 400 DPI, you know, 2.4, 2.3 in-game sense, something like that. Okay, and then you're saying, okay, we're gonna keep all of that the same, your 400 and everything at the very starting point. So on the starting point of your graph here. So at your starting point, you're keeping your sensitivity the same. So right here is where you start out, right? This is the same as if you're starting out on your regular low sense 400. Okay, well now, because you've set such a high sensitivity cap, or whatever, now you're going from 400 to like 1000 DPI. Now, my guess is you probably don't have any experience or any kind of long-term play on such a high sensitivity, let alone 400, 6, you know, all the sensitivities in between. I'm just using DPI as a reference because I know a lot of people will keep their in-game sense the same and then change their DPI. Like, okay, because a lot of people make the 400 to 800 switch really, really popular, you know, and then they convert their sensitivity, so they're kind of used to 800. So what I did is I stopped trying to use Mouse Accel like this just insane flick machine, because I really don't have much control past 800, 400 to 800. It's about double. It's about double. I think technically it's about 1.9 times your regular sense if you go from 400 to 800. I believe I worked that out on here before. So you don't have the experience in between all of this stuff, right? But I do have the experience of 400 to 600. So I set my cap. Basically, I'm going from a 400 cents to a 600 cents. I have control on these two different sensitivities, but I played on them for several years. I can go all the way up to 800 if I really want to, but this is pretty much like 400 to 800 is about the top end of my dexterity. I can't really control. 800 is like pretty much like if I leave my in-game sense the same and I switch stay, I just wouldn't have the same consistency as I would. My flicks would probably be okay, but I probably couldn't track for anything without Mouse Accel. Okay. All right, let's get rid of this here. All right, so a lot of people will say, well, all right, well, I just use Mouse Accel so I can turn around fast and all that stuff. I honestly think that Mouse Accel is a waste. It's a waste of, you shouldn't use Mouse Accel if you're going to put an offset. So if you put whatever, 10, whatever, you say, well, now my starting sensitivity is 400 and it stays that way. My starting sensitivity is 400 and it stays that way until I like flick like crazy, right? The problem is if you're doing that, you're pretty much wasting all of the benefits, I believe, of Mouse Accel. So let's get back to this. So you start, it's great, wow, amazing, Mouse Accel, it's so crazy, I can flick like crazy, oh my god, you're hitting shots you've never hit before, and then here comes the inconsistency. Good luck. Oh, I'm not gonna be able to spell that. Inconsistency. Oh my god, it's so bad. Okay, so basically, let's say tracking problems. Okay, tracking problems. Okay, losing 1v1s when you could have done it without Accel. So what happens? You turn it off, and then it's so crazy how many times I've seen this circle. People start out here, wow, 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 it's great, problems, and then they eventually go back to the start without it. And I think one of the reasons why you could be more consistent when you use Mouse Accel is honestly if you practice these two sensitivities without it. So you keep your in-game sense the same. This is like a warming up exercise. You keep your whatever your starting sensitivity was when you first started without Mouse Accel. You practice on it, okay? You get good at it. And then whatever your cap is, if it's 1.8, if it's 1.9, if it's 2, then you need to practice, I would say, 3 intervals. So for me, if I was going to set mine to my cap to 1.9, okay, that would basically be 400 to 800 or 400 to 900, something like that, DPI. So in game, you need to go in and basically practice on all three. So 400, like 600, maybe 700, and then 900 or 800, something like that. So it's like 3 intervals of in between. For me, that's too many sensitivities. I prefer the 400 to 600. That's the only jump I've got. It's a decent jump. It's still challenging, but this is my limit here. So that's the reason why my cap has and always will be 1.5, because 1.5 is basically a 400 to 600 DPI change. That's it. It's not a lot. It's controllable, and I have the muscle memory and experience on 400, 600, and 800 DPI. So that's one of the reasons why I've been able to stick with Mouse Accel for so long, and why I've seen so many other people give up on it. And it's truly, truly sad, because when you use Accel in this straight linear graph with no offset, I believe it's the most effective and you get the most benefits out of it. I think when you start changing stuff, the natural is good. I think it's a good learning curve. I think I've talked about that before. The jump, I think, is trash. The power is extremely good if you're playing like a really only like a flick, anything that's just flick central, or if you play Apex and you use like a sniper rifle, a wingman, or shotguns, and that's it. You don't use any spray weapons. You know, Valorant would be really good because it's a very consistent feel. But none of that's going to matter if you don't have the experience or the practice of tracking on those different sensitivities. Before you do this, you have to master whatever sensitivity range that you're playing in. For me, it's 400 and 600 DPI. Those are the ranges I'm the most proficient at. I could play in 400, I can play on 600, I can even play in 800, but it's just consistently worse than the other two. So that's the reason why I start out basically at a 400 DPI, which is like 5.5, 1.5 in game, and then my cap is 1.5, and all of that equals out to a 400. And if I left everything the same in game with Mouse Accel off, it would basically be like doing a DPI switch from 1.5 to 400, or excuse me, so 1.5 starting out at 400 DPI and ending on 600 at the very end. So basically what it comes down to is Mouse Accel isn't for everyone. Before you try it, I would just try a higher sensitivity. If you don't have any mastery of different sensitivities, maybe a higher sense is really what you need. And maybe I'm not talking about, I wouldn't go, a lot of people go from the 400 to 800 DPI switch or whatever. I mean, why not try something in the middle, like 1.4 times, 1.3 times, whatever your sense is, before trying Accel, and I think you'll have a little bit better luck. But none of this matters if you don't practice with Mouse Accel off, because you're going to lose your tracking. Because like I said before, tracking is different on Mouse Accel. It's more of a kind of hesitate right here, go a little bit farther, hesitate, go a little bit farther, hesitate, and continue on. It's not necessarily a linear thing, you know, from A to B. But your muscle memory needs this. Your muscle memory needs this because it still needs to know the starting point and the end point, so that you can be able to still track and have both of these basically like muscle memory, you know, in your arm, your wrist, your fingers, all that stuff. So hopefully that's not too much of a butchered explanation, but it was just funny to me because I was watching some videos the other day, and it was like, I mean, I think I went to like 3 different channels. I think another guy named is Daz, something like that. Daz, forget, I think something like that. And I think he did the same thing. I think he tried Mouse Excel. He posted some videos on it and everything, and then before you know it, he's turned it off again. And I think that's the reason why. It's just because it's just like if you don't know, if you really don't think about it, you say, okay, do I really have the mastery of maybe 3 different sensitivities in my sensitivity cap? Well, if you don't, well, you're probably going to be inconsistent at Mouse Excel, because it is fundamentally still the same as Mouse Excel in game, in Windows, all of that. It's still different sensitivities. So if you don't actually have them mastered, then then the end results are no good. Alright guys, that's it.